Yo, what up? How's it going? And welcome back for another video. In today's video, I'll be talking about some of the best early game item holders for your late game carries. So I'll be talking about the 4 cost and the 5 cost carries and the best 1 and 2 costs and some 3 costs that can hold the items for them. I will not be talking about 3 cost very much in this video, except for as item holders, just because if you're going to play 3 costs as your late game carry, 90% of the time, you'll typically have them by stage 2 or stage 3, and you just play around them, so you don't need an item holder. Unless you're a one trick, then you just force whenever. And niche scenarios where you do actually transition to a 3 cost carry later on in the game. So that's why I won't be talking about them. Other things we won't be talking about are the tanks and utility carries in the late game, because typically you don't plan to carry a utility champion except for Seraphine, which I'll talk about. And, if you're going to play a Braum or a Mundo late game, you just throw items on like a Darius, Singed, Alawi, Vi, Cho'Gath, whatever's tanky, right? You just put tanky items on there. Okay, a couple things before we get into each of the units. We're going to go through each of them. A couple quick things are, I'm just going to show you guys some items that are decent on the carries. I'm not going to talk about best in slot, and so don't focus on that. That is the biggest noob trap ever, is best in slot, so that's why I don't put a lot of stock into it in my videos. I'll just be showing you guys some items that are pretty decent on the carries and some early game units that can also use those same exact items. All right, and if you want to know the compositions to run with these early game carries, I have a comp guide for early game. I also have an augment guide for early game. Links will be in the comments and Links will be in the pinned comment and description below, and the end card. So check those out if you want to, if you're left with some questions at the end. All right, cool. Let's get into it. Now we have Jhin. So with Jhin, you need some type of damage amp like Infinity Edge. Infinity Edge is going to be great. Some type of shred, usually like Giant Slayer or Last Whisper, so you can kill frontline. And then third item is just kind of whatever. You can build some sustain like a BT, like a Hodge. You can build a Rage Blade for some damage amp, or you can build Titans, QSS, a lot of good items that you can build third for Jhin. But typically you need damage amp and some type of way to kill frontliners. And cool. So some of the best item holders for Jhin are going to be Ezreal, Twitch, Tristana, Trundle, Warwick, and GP. Again, these are not all the people who can hold the items. These are just some of the ones that I like. My favorite ones are going to be Ezreal, Warwick, and Tristana. Ezreal and Warwick fit into the Innovator comp, playing Innovators. If you're going to be playing around Innovators, very easy to item hold on these units in the early game, and they use these items very well. And then Tristana is going to be a very good item holder if you're going to go more of a bodyguard route early game into like a bodyguard Jhin comp, bodyguard enchanter Jhin comp in the late game. That's going to be your best bet there. And then other ones like these guys can use AD items as well, and Twitch as well. It's going to be pretty decent. All right, let's get into the next one. Alrighty, so the next one we're going to talk about is Lux. If you may have noticed, I skipped Fiora. We'll be coming back to Fiora when we talk about Jinx, because Fiora and Jinx are a little bit unique in the fact that they have very dual scaling, which is just kind of complicated to talk about. So I'll be talking about them together at the end. All right, cool. So now we have Lux. This is my favorite late game carry right now. I just love playing AP on the current patch that I'm on. And so we have a Lux right here. What she typically needs is blue buff plus damage. You don't always have to have blue buff if you have like socialites, you have scholar, stuff like that. But this is going to be your best bet. Blue buff plus AP. That's all you need on to our girl Lux over here. Some of the best item holders is going to be TF and Katarina. Those are the easiest transitions. TF's a great blue buff user, great with AP amp items. And also he's an Arcanist, so you can play around Arcanist. Katarina, very good with these damage amp items as well. And also she's an Academy, so if you want to play like an Academy's transition into Lux, very easy transition there. Other decent item holders are like Ziggs. Sometimes you'll pivot out of a TF into a Malzahar for mid game. I do that a lot. One thing I just want to note about that is if a lot of people are building Dequaws, and if TF is still as strong as he is on the current patch, sometimes you don't pivot out of TF to Malzahar for mid game, just because Malzahar can't get past frontliners, whereas TF can, because he can hit backline. So just think about that a little bit. Miss Fortune can be very good. She's very good with damage amp items. She's not the best blue buff user, but it does help her get her first cast off. And then Vi is also very decent with these items if you want to do it. But again, my favorite ones are going to be Twisted Fate and Katarina, as that transition is pretty easy. Okay, cool. Now we're going to talk about Seraphine as a carry. So I don't see a lot of people play Seraphine carry, but I actually play a lot of Seraphine carry when the augments make a lot of sense, like when you have bodyguard augments or enchanter augments, like Ardent Sensor and stuff like that. And the stand behind me augment, very, very strong. When I get stand behind me, I really look to play Seraphine because it's very good with that. Very good for building like a really, really, really tanky comp. Very good on stage 5. Anyways, cool. So Seraphine, she's very good with some type of mana amp like Sojin or Rage Blade. Not a very good blue buff user. Her mana cost is very high. And if you're going to be playing a stall comp, Archangel's amazing on her. Morello is a decent item on her to get some extra damage in there, but you can also just build more AP like an Archangel, like Jeweled, like a Death Cap. Those are all very good as well. And so let's go through some of these right here. So some of the item holders we have are Zillion. Not the best item holder, but sometimes I have to item hold Zillion, especially if I'm playing Innovators and I pivot into a Seraphine with my Innovators. And then, yeah, cool. We have TF, Malzahar, Ziggs, Zyra, MF, and Caitlyn all can use these items pretty decently. Now, TF is not the best Sojin user. He's a little bit better with blue buff as his mana cost is small. But if he gets nerfed, I imagine they're going to nerf his mana, and that would just make him a better Sojin user. Morello, he's the best Morello user in the early game. Morello is very, very, very strong on here. Again, you don't have to play Morello on Seraphine, but Morello is very good if you're going to play Seraphine carry build because you need any damage you can get in there for the late game because you are playing a low damage build. Malzahar, very good with these items. Ziggs is fine. MF, very good with these items. And then Caitlyn, if you want to play with these items, I usually play them until I hit an MF and I can play around MF. So cool. There we are. Seraphine carry. All right. Sion. Now, Sion's a little bit, he's kind of funny. So Sion, his best items are going to be Crit Amp right here. So the Infinity Edge Jeweled. He is AP, and then Hodge is decent right there. But third item can totally just be a tank item, and you don't have to build the crit variation. You can just build, you don't have to build the crit variation, you can just build AP, but this is very good to build the crit variation, probably best on slot. But third item could just be tank or some type of survivability item right there as well. So some of the best units to hold these items are going to be TF, Ziggs, Katarina, Malzahar, and Vi. All use these items pretty decently. Some of my favorites are going to be Vi, Katarina, and Twisted Fate. As Twisted Fate, I just love Twisted Fate. I think he's just so good. You know, pre-nerf, maybe he's probably going to get nerfed. Katarina can use these items amazingly, obviously. And then Vi, and Katarina is also good because you can play around Talon. If you're going to play Imperial, you hold the items on him, and then you can transition to a Sion once you hit him. You can get out of Katarina and Assassins, right? And then Vi is pretty good with some damage amp items. But that transition is a little bit more difficult. Cool. I don't play a lot of Sion, but he is very fun. All right, now we're going to talk about the God God. Okay, so we have the God God up here. The items I have on him right now is Runan's, Last Whisper, and Hand of Justice. Now, his items are very situational. Runan's very strong on him. It also makes it very flexible between playing this guy, playing Jinx, and playing Yone, which they all three use Runan's pretty well. Very, very good early game item as well. So Runan's very strong. Usually Urgot he is hitting frontline, so he needs a way to kill the frontline. Unless you can get that from your augments, then you need to build it on your guy. So like a Last Whisper or a Giant Slayer. And then third item can either be more damage or healing. He's very good with healing because of how it scales with Chemtech and how he scales out throughout the fight. So that's very strong on him. But if you get healing from your augments or from Socialite or something like that, then just use a damage amp item right here like IE or Deathblade or something like that, or a Giant Slayer, you know, can be very good right here. So just play around your augments, but typically he needs 2 damage amp and 1 shred. And so just think about that whenever you're building him. All right, so some of the best users of these items are going to be Kog'Maw, Ezreal, Twitch, Tristana, Trundle, Warwick, and Samira are going to be some of the best users of these items. Some of my favorites are going to be Warwick, Trundle, and Twitch, just because those transitions are pretty easy. You can play Warwick, you can play around Chemtechs, Innovators, pretty easy transition into your Urgot. Also, when you play around Warwick, it's very easy to play flex between Yone, Warwick, or Yone, Jinx, and Urgot. Very easy to flex that. Trundle, very good user because you will be wanting to play around bruisers. Typically, when you play Urgot, you don't always have to, but that's gonna be a pretty easy transition because you play bruisers. You can add your Chemtechs in there, and then once you hit your Urgot, you can just sell your Trundle and swap the items over. Twitch, same idea, easy to play around Chemtechs, and you can item hold your Twitch and transition to Urgot, or flip the items to Warwick and then transition to Urgot later. So all that good stuff right there, man. All right, coolio. All right, Yone, on the patch that I'm making this on, Yone is an absolute crank, probably the best 4-cost carry in the game, depending on who you ask. But his item is going to look like this. Runan's 100% his best item, unless they change how Runan's works on his clone. His clone does proc Runan's, so it is very, very, very strong. I can't imagine they'll change that. It'd be a big rework to him, but it's very, very, very strong. Titan's another strong item because he does have built-in healing. He does live a long time in the fight. If you can keep him alive, you can get a lot of value out of that. And then a damage amp item for third item. There's other good items like QSS, Giant Slayer, Last Whisper for hitting frontline. But, you know, typically you just want some damage amp, some survivability, and a rune ends because he can't actually hit backline. So you don't need shred as much as you do on a lot of other carries. Cool. So some of the best item holders here are going to be Talon, Samira, Garen, Ezreal, Twitch, Tristana, Trundle, Warwick, and GP. Some of my favorites are going to be Samira, as that transition is very easy. She's very strong with these items and items of the like. That transition is very easy. Garen's transition is easy if you're going to play around Academy. He's not the best Rudan's user, but he's a good user of the other two. And if you just want to stack a tanky item on him as third. Warwick, very good with these items. And then Trundle is also very good with these kind of amping items and survivability items as he does scale very well throughout a fight. So these are some of the best users right here. Oh, I don't know what just happened, but we're going to get out of that anyway, so it's all good. All right, cool. All right, now we're going to talk about Akali. This is when we start to get carries that are a little bit weird because their items are kind of like dual scaling-esque. You know what I mean? Because Akali is AP, but she is an assassin, so it's a little awkward, right? Okay, so we have Akali here. Blue buff, very strong on her. Definitely don't have to have it, but very strong. Infinity Edge is going to be our best damage amp item. And then Hand of Justice is going to be our best healing plus damage amp, especially if you're already building crit, as they do kind of interact together in a very positive way. So those are very strong combinations together. But if you don't know what to build, it's just crit plus AP plus blue buff or plus any type of survivability like GA, QSS, stuff like that. Titans is okay if you have healing, but you know, this is probably going to be your best in slot. But you know, just play around whatever you can. Okay, so some of the best holders for the items, as she is a little bit awkward as she has these dual scaling things going on. We have Warwick, Twisted Fate, Talon, Katarina, Tristana, Vi, and Malzahar. So it is a little bit weird, right? Because blue buff is just amazing on TF, and if you end up getting like a jeweled and you're gonna play like jeweled in transition, that transition's pretty easy. If you're going to play like a crit TF build for the early game, that transition is really easy. You're playing syndicates. You just play your TF as your carry, and then you drop him for Akali as soon as you hit your Akali 1. Pretty easy. Cool. And another good one is going to be Katarina, as she is an assassin, so you can make that transition from assassins pretty easy. Very good user of blue buff and Hodge and Infinity Edge, so very easy transition there. And then Malzahar, this transition is a little bit more difficult, but he is a very good user of all of these items. You know, as long as you have the jeweled crit amp instead, or if you have the double crit amp, very good user of all these items, very good with healing as well. And then Vi is pretty insane with these items with the jeweled variation. And then Talon can be very good with these, but obviously you can't use blue buff. And if you're going to be playing Warwick, he can use the first two items right here. And if you're going to be playing like the Innovator comp with Warwick as your early game carry, which I talk about in my comp guide, then you know, Heimerdinger's decent with blue buff, and you can get out of that. But that transition is a little bit difficult. So just, you know, be advised. Cool. Alrighty, now we're going to be talking about Jinx. This is when we're going to talk about Jinx and Fiora, because they do fall into a very similar boat, as they can use AP and they can use AD items. I think I'll talk more about Fiora on the next slide. Fiora's just a little bit weird. Okay, so this is the AD version of Jinx. It's actually pretty decent dual scaling. But so this is if you're going to play the AD variation. I'm going to talk about the AP variation, like the one-shot blow up your board variation. But these are some decent items. Rage Blade Hodge, Giant Slayer, as she does have dual scaling, so these dual scaling items are pretty decent. But again, you can play other items. You can play AD items. You can play Urgot items. You can play Yone items on her. Don't think about it too hard. Just build some damage, right? And then GA is also very good on her, as she does kind of like suicide in there. So just know that. QSS is fine as well. All right, so we have Samira, Kog'Maw, Ezreal, Twitch, Tristana, Trundle, Warwick, and Garen. Okay, some of my favorite ones are going to be Trundle, Warwick, and Kog'Maw, as these transitions are pretty easy, because when you play Jinx, a lot of times you're playing around flexing. You're playing around flexing Urgot. You're playing around flexing Urgot, Kaisa, and Jinx is going to be your easiest way to play around Jinx for the most part. You can get pretty dizzy trying to play these late game carries, as they can use a lot of the same items on the same setups. But yeah, so you're gonna be playing around that, and you're gonna be playing around bruisers, so you can hold your sister, your Vi, and also to keep the options open to play around your Urgot and your Kaisa, who also utilize bruisers pretty well. So That's why it's going to be good on Trundle, Warwick, and Kog'Maw, all people that fit very easily into the Bruiser Chemtech tree, and that's why we're going to be carrying them there. Now, if you're playing Fiora, kind of the same idea, right? Because these items can be used on Fiora. You can do flex to challengers. You can use Warwick that same way, Trundle that same way, the Kog'Maw that same way. So if you're going to play Fiora and you want to use items like this, totally fine. But yeah, so Fiora's a little weird. Fiora and Jinx are weird. That's why I'm talking about them together. All right, now here is the AP one-shot build that you can do on Jinx and Fiora. This is what a lot of people will claim to be best in slot on Fiora, but Fiora can use a lot of items, just as Jinx can. So this is IE Jeweled Hodge, just absolutely the highest damage you can do on a drop down. Maybe Death Cap is a little bit more, but Hodge does give you crit amp and the healing as well, so it is very nice to have. So some of the best item holders for these are going to be Graves, as he does do AP and AD, because he does have the auto attack bonus. Kog'Maw, TF, Vi, MF, and Malzahar. Some of my favorites are going to be Twisted Fate, Misfortune, and Malzahar. I just love Twisted Fate. Very good with crit amp. Misfortune melts the front line, very strong with crit amp. And then Malzahar is also very strong with crit amp. As long as they aren't building Bramble and Dequal, the Malzahar is going to be a very decent item holder for here. It also keeps you in the mutant tree, and kind of the same idea of what I just talked about playing around bruisers and mutants and stuff like that is the reason why Malzahar is going to be good. And now if you're playing Jinx, Jinx doesn't have to have that mutant bruiser setup, so that's why I transitioned from TF, and Misfortune is still fine because they're very good item holders. You can play around a bodyguard setup. And when you play Jinx this way, you definitely don't have to have Sister, because you're not caring about her auto attack damage. You're just caring about her blowing up the board. Now, if you're playing Fiora, same type of idea, and she's especially good with that bodyguard setup and stuff like that. Again, if you're playing Fiora, she doesn't have to have this full, one shot you constantly build, but it is very good on her, and a lot of people will claim that's best in slot. But Fiora is also very good with like Titans. She's very good with AD items. She's very good with QSS, very good with a lot of stuff. So, they kind of go in tandem. That's why I didn't dedicate a whole thing to Fiora, because this video would be crazy long. All right, cool. Now we're going to be talking about Kaisa. Again, Kaisa is in that same Chemtech bruisery tree that Jinx can fit naturally into and stuff like that. So usually when you want to play Jinx, you're thinking about also playing Kaisa a lot of times, especially if the augments for mutation is very good, or the mutation is very good. Okay, cool. So we have Kaisa. Generally, when you play Kaisa, you want some like attack speed, some type of amp. She is AP, and some type of healing. Now you can get these things from your augments, so just know that. You can instead opt for like a Giant Slayer or full damage, like an Infinity Edge, or if you're playing around Clockworks, maybe you don't need the Rage Blade, but she does have very good attack speed amp, especially her being a challenger. And you can also flex her around challengers, around Fiora, because look, these are decent Fiora items, right? So she fits in the two different trees, the Bruiser Chemtech tree and also the Challenger tree. So really think about playing her a lot, especially when you have items that look kind of like this, like Fiora, like Jinx items. Okay, cool. All right, some of the best item holders are going to be Talon. Kog'Maw, TF, Twitch, Quinn, Shaco, MF, Warwick, and Malzahar. Wow, we got through that. Okay, cool. So some of the easiest one is going to be Kog'Maw for sure, as you can play around mutants, you can play around bruiser, mutants, and stuff like that in the early game, and just a very easy, clean transition from Kog'Maw to Kaisa. Probably the easiest one. Misfortune, very good with these items as well. If you have a lot of stall, that is going to be more if you have the bodyguard. Probably if you have the bodyguard setup, unless you're playing around mercenaries and you can't play a bruiser setup, right? But she does fit a little bit better into the bodyguard setup, and that's going to be more of a flexing between Fiora, Jinx, and Kaisa, right? So that's a little bit of that route. And then Shaco's also very decent with the items. Crit amp right there, right? It's very good with Rage Blade, decent with some healing items as well. So that is also a decent one to play around if you have a Sin variation in the early game and you're going for a full board flip. That transition is a little bit harder because, as I said, you will have to do a full board flip. All right, let's get out of this. And we're on to our last one, which is our man, Viktor. I do love playing Viktor. Okay, cool. So here's some items for Viktor. We have some mana amp. We have Archangels because he does cast pretty late into the fight, so you can get a lot of value from this. And if he has to cast twice, get a lot of value. And then we have a Jeweled. Jeweled works very well in tandem with if you already have a lot of AP, works very well in tandem with that. So if you don't have a lot of AP, go for some more AP in this spot usually. But if you have an Archangel, you probably have some good AP amp. You can also just go full crit, right? Obviously, but that's going to be better if you already have a lot of mana, like you're playing, or a lot of AP, like you're playing Arcane and stuff like that. One thing to note, if you are playing like a Scholar tech build, or you're playing like a 4 Scholar with the Lissandra 3 frontline or something like that, you don't necessarily need a Sojin. You can just go for more amp, more damage amp to fully one-shot on your first cast. So just know that. Just build AP and mana amp and you should be fine. But again, if you have the Scholar tech, you don't necessarily need mana amp, but it is pretty good. All right, so some of the best item holders are going to be Zilean, Caitlyn, Graves, TF, Ziggs, Malzahar, Misfortune, and Zyra. Some of my favorites are going to be Malzahar, Misfortune, and Caitlyn, as they are some of the best users of Sojin in the early and mid game. Malzahar, going to be a pretty easy transition if you're playing Arcanist. By the way, you could just totally item hold for TF and then transition to Malzahar items. Remember, if you want to play Malzahar for your mid game, really make sure there's not a lot of dequals in the lobby, because you will get countered very hard by a dequal, and you will need to position around that. So it can be difficult transitioning. A lot of times you can just stay with TF until you hit your late game carries. Cool. Misfortune, insanely good with these items, especially. You're gonna, it's not as easy and clean of a transition, but Misfortune is going to be a very good item holder, especially if you're going to play around like a bodyguard tech and then transition into Arcanist for your late game. It's not really that hard of a transition. And then Caitlyn, but it is a little bit harder than like Arcanist into that, right? And then we have Caitlyn, who can item hold these pretty well. Caitlyn is AP, obviously. I usually like to item hold Caitlyn with these until I hit an MF, and then I just splash items over to MF. I just like MF a lot better. I think she has a lot more damage potential, a lot more carry potential, especially in the early and the mid game. Cool. I think that's all I wanted to say about these. Some of these other ones are fine, and all that good stuff. I feel like I wanted to say one more thing about Arcanist, but it just slipped my mind. But yeah, I feel good about that. Oh, one other thing I wanted to say. This is what I wanted to say is Lux. Lux can item hold for Viktor in the late game, right? If you're wanting to play a Viktor and you built these types of items, just play Lux if you hit Lux, and then you can swap out Lux for a Viktor, right? This highly depends on balance and highly depends on like if you're playing around academies in the late game. But at the current patch that I am, if you had these items, you would want to play Viktor 1 over Lux 2. That is highly dependent on balance and what your augments and comp looks like. So just take that with a grain of salt. But in general, if you have items that look like this, look like more like Viktor items and Lux items, a Viktor 1 is going to be better than Lux 2, as long as you can make sure that he can cast. Because if he doesn't cast, then you take a 20 health loss. So that feels pretty bad. All right, guys, that's going to be it in the video. Again, this isn't every single item holder. Everything that I say in these guides isn't gospel. You obviously want to play around your augments, play around what's happening in your game. Like I've had games where Zilean carry was my best early game carry, but I didn't recommend him as any of the best ones here. But I've had Zilean carry pop off in the early and mid game because I had innovators. I high rolled a really good setup for him, right? So just know these are in general guides to work from, but in your games, this game is complicated, very nuanced. Play whatever makes sense for you. All right, guys, I appreciate all of you. If you want more of me, I stream about 5 days a week at twitch.tv/TrajanTFT. I have a Twitter that I update every day, and I'd love to have more followers over there because it does get a little bit lonely. But if you're already over there, I do appreciate you guys. And I've been getting a lot of new followers on Twitter, so I do appreciate you guys. And yeah, if you enjoyed the video, please let me know in the comments. I love reading that stuff. It obviously helps me on YouTube. I'm trying to grow a business, so it does help me. If you guys want to support me in a way that's not directly financial, then leaving a comment is a big way to do that. Helps me with the YouTube algorithm, helps me with YouTube engagement, and I genuinely do love reading them, and I reply to every comment I get for the most part. So yeah, that's gonna be it. Appreciate you guys, and good luck climbing, and I'll see you guys on the next video, wherever you are. Hope you're doing well, and bye. Bye.